I want to welcome you to our course on famous Romans. It is a counterpart to an earlier course we did on famous Greeks. And like famous Greeks, it rests upon the assumption that history is made by great individuals, not by anonymous social and economic forces, but by individual men and women who shape history. This was the view of the ancients, and our course on famous Romans looks at the biographies of men like Julius Caesar and Pompey through the eyes of the biographer Plutarch, and for the later period, the imperial period, emperors like Augustus and Claudius through the eyes of the biographer Suetonius. We focus on three central periods in Roman history, decisive periods not only in the history of Rome, but in the history of the world. The Great War between Rome and Carthage, the Second Punic War from 218 to 201 BC, the years that saw the decline and fall of republican liberty at Rome, the period from 133 BC down to the death of Julius Caesar in 44 BC. And we focus upon that figure of Julius Caesar, one of the most important individuals in all of history, who brought an end to the political problems of Rome, but at the price of replacing freedom by monarchy and establishing the third period of our course, the great age of the immense majesty of the Roman Empire, the 1st and 2nd centuries AD, in which the ordinary citizen achieved a level of affluence not reached again until the 20th century, and when the cultural, political, architectural, intellectual currents for the next 1,500 years of European history were laid, the age that saw the emergence of Christianity. So these three periods will be the focal point of our course. And in the last of these periods, the 2nd century AD, biography reached its apex in the classical world. This was the age in which both Plutarch and Suetonius lived. Plutarch would set the form of biography all through the Middle Ages in Byzantium. He would be rediscovered in Western Europe during the late Middle Ages and flourish in the Renaissance. His translation into English would shape some of the greatest plays of Shakespeare. Julius Caesar, Antony and Cleopatra, Coriolanus. And Plutarch would work upon the minds of figures like Rousseau, Ralph Waldo Emerson, and Harry Truman. That most practical of American presidents would say that whenever he had a real problem, he would sit down with old Plutarch, and he would find more wisdom in Plutarch than in all of his advisors together. Suetonius, written in Latin, Plutarch wrote in Greek, Suetonius would live all through the Western Middle Ages, when in the distant court of Charlemagne at Aachen, Einhard the monk got ready to write a biography of a man who rivaled in his achievements Julius Caesar, Charlemagne. He turned to Suetonius' lives for his inspiration. So these figures themselves, our biographers, our sources, are themselves important elements in history. Now, when we look at these three great events in world history, the rise of Rome to world power, for that was the result of the war with Hannibal. The war with Hannibal so shook the Roman people that they literally swore never again to be in such danger. And so out of this war, studied in the lives that will appear before us, Rome would emerge as the only superpower in the world by the year 167 BC. And then at the height of its power, we shall see from 133 down to 44 BC, how the Romans came into political gridlock, tore themselves apart with civil war, and finally gave up that liberty that had made them so great, only to accept an even greater charge of empire from the Caesars. So let us begin our course back in the year 218 BC. And I'd ask you to put aside wherever we are at the moment and shift your minds back to a March day in 218. And we are in the Forum of Rome. It is already the worthy political center of the capital of Italy. For Rome by 218 BC is the most important power in Italy. It has expanded its power to Sicily. But it is still not absolutely dominant even in the Western Mediterranean world. It continues to be threatened by the mighty power of Carthage, only a day's sail from Sicily in what we would call Tunisia today. And we are in the Forum amidst its mighty public buildings, its Senate House, the assembly where the Roman people meet, and with statues all up and down the Forum of great Romans who have come before. And I would like to look at the first of our famous Romans, Publius Cornelius Scipio. He is the consul of that year 218 BC, and he embodies for us the qualities of the Roman aristocrat. For Rome is a free republic, but it is guided by aristocratic families who generation after generation serve the republic. Serve it for no pay, serve it only out of a sense of public duty and out of the desire for glory and honor. But like most of the best aristocrats of his day, Publius Cornelius Scipio wants honor and glory only for the sake of making his country great. And he is there in the Forum with his son, Publius Cornelius Scipio, a boy of about 18 years of age. Now let's stop just for a moment and think about Roman names. Publius Cornelius Scipio. The very name of a Roman expresses their pride in family. Publius, his first name, is what his mother would call him, his father would call him. The Romans were not very inventive about first names. There were about a dozen of them in common use. Gaius, Marcus, Publius, sometimes Quintus and Sextus, fifth son, sixth son. So they didn't use a lot of imagination there. But the second part of the name is the Cornelius, the family of the Cornelii. And that expressed one of the greatest names in all of Roman history. And then Scipio is the cognomen, or the branch of the family to which the Publius Cornelius Scipio belongs. For the Cornelii were such an extended family that they had numerous branches. And generally in the middle you say Publius Cornelius, and then the son of Publius, before you give the Scipio. For there is great pride in the ancestry and naming your father. Now this man, the center of our attention in this lecture, Publius Cornelius Scipio, will sire this son, Scipio, who will ultimately defeat Hannibal and go down as a general worthy to rank with Napoleon and a statesman worthy to rank with George Washington. His grandson will ultimately destroy Carthage in the year 146 BC. And that Publius Cornelius Scipio will be the subject of another of our lectures. And then the same Publius Cornelius Scipio will have as his great-grandsons Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus, who will transform the history of Rome and begin the social revolution that will ultimately emerge in the dictatorship of Julius Caesar. So it is a family faithful for the history of Rome. And so the consul of the year, 218, Publius Cornelius Scipio, is there with his son. His son has enormous pride in his father. The father wears the purple robe of a consul. He is preceded everywhere he goes by 12 lictors, men carrying the bundle of rods with an axe inside them. That is the symbol of the power of a consul on campaign to beat or even execute a Roman citizen without trial. Even inside the walls of Rome, inside the sacred area, the power of the consul is enormous. He calls an assembly of the Roman people. He can call an assembly of the Senate and address it. Every consul is a member of the Senate, a member of that body of 300 who guide the policy of Rome, almost entirely composed of aristocrats. The son knows that his father has something special to talk to him about that day. The son knows that ambassadors have gone off to Carthage to make one more try to bring about peace with the Carthaginian people, that the arrival of these ambassadors will bring the signal whether or not there will be peace at Rome, or whether a war certain to be long and arduous, will have to be fought, a war which may well have to be fought by the generation of the son. as well as of the Father. The Father would say to the Son, young Publius, tell me something. Tell me something about what Rome is. What do you mean, Father? Well, what do we stand for? Why, we are a res publica, Father. We are a republic. We are literally the people's thing. For at Rome, the people is sovereign. They are absolute masters. But does that mean that we are a democracy, boy? No, Father. Good heavens, no, we are not a... Good heavens, that's the way the Roman would speak. Good heavens, no, we are not a democracy. In a democracy, things run amok. No, we are a balanced constitution. That is to say that there is a balance between the essential elements of government. The need for broad base of public support, certainly, but there also must be an aristocratic element. Guidance of the commonwealth by a small body of the best, and that is our Senate. And then there is need for strong executive authority, a commander-in-chief, and that's you, Father, for you are consul of the Roman people, 2 of them elected every year, because all power tends to corrupt, the Roman believes, and it must be checked. So 2 consuls, not 1. The no vote of a consul always overriding the yes vote of another, unless their own campaign. Yes, and also as well, they are elected once a year. And while great men might be re-elected as consul, it was highly unusual. But this year, you are consul, just like so many of our ancestors before us, because the stately home, not lavish, just stately, of the Scipios would have in it a whole hall filled with the bust of the great ancestors who had gone before, and a family tree linking them to the great Cornelii of the past. And as a republic, what is our defining attribute? Why, it is liberty, libertas. Does that mean the freedom to do anything you want? No. It means freedom under the law. Do we believe in equality? No. Only that men are equal before the law, that they are citizens. Well, if we believe in liberty, why don't women vote? Oh, Father, we admire our Roman women, and they are models of chastity. But to be a citizen, you must serve in the army. Every Roman must serve in the army up until the age of 46. And he must serve at least 16 years between the age of 20 and 46. And in time of crisis, 20 years. And he must serve 10 years before he can even hold a public office. And that is why I want you to serve under me your 10 years of service. And I am ready to do it, Father. Now, the Romans are a very historically minded people. The Greeks have a rich mythology, but for the Greek we must remember, as we saw in famous Greeks, that they believed it to be history. And so too the Romans have a rich mythology based on history, and the more we learn from archaeology, the more credence we put in this early history of Rome. And to Publius Cornelius Scipio, the consul, and to his son, this is reality. So that statue that we have there, son of a wolf nursing these little twins. Twin boys, though, not little twin wolves. What is that? Why, Father, you will find that not only in Rome, but a statue of that in every one of our colonies throughout Italy. It is the statue of Romulus and Remus, the founders of Rome. Well, tell me a little bit about that. What does it mean to us? Well, Father, you know, we have the story that Aeneas came from Troy and with just a remnant of people landed in Italy and founded, mixing with the people who were already here, the Latin race. But Dad, that would be, as we must step back a little bit, as we would date these things, we Americans, that would probably be around 1150 BC. And then there was a long line of kings descended from Aeneas and his son Julius. Why, where would you find a descendant of Julius today, Father? Oh, in that ne'er-do-well patrician family, the Julii Caesares. That is right, son. But don't be like them. They have not served the country well enough. No, 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 Father. Well, a long line of these descendants lived at Alba Longa, a few miles into the hills from Rome, and came to pass around the year 773 BC. or as Scipio would have said 20 years before the founding of the city of Rome, that there were two brothers. One was a good man, the other was evil. And the evil man took away the throne from his brother, to whom it rightfully belonged, and not only took away the throne, but took the daughter of his brother, in other words, his niece, and since she might have a claim to the throne, locked her up so that no one but he could possess the power. And somehow she got pregnant. She said that the god Mars came to her, and she got pregnant, and she bore two little boys. And already at birth, they were strong, sturdy fellows. So this evil uncle took them and put them in a little cradle and set them out into the swollen flood waters of the Tiber, the yellow Tiber. And they floated and floated. Of course, he hoped they would drown. But instead, they came to rest, why, right over there, Father, right where the Tiber is today. And they were there crying and yelling in their little cradle. And a mother wolf came up, took pity on the little creatures, licked them, gave them to nurse. They got stronger and stronger. And then woodpeckers came and fed them too. That is why the wolf and the woodpecker are sacred to the Roman people, are sacred animals. And then a shepherd found them and took them home. And they were reared up to be strong and vigorous. But they were large and handsome, and they knew they were special. And so they sought out the secret of their birth and went back to Alba Longa, overthrew the evil uncle, put their grandfather back in his place, honored their mother, and then said, we want to find a city worthy of us. So they came back to the place where they had been born, where they had been reared, and there on the Palatine Hill, right up there, they decided to found a city. But both of them were ambitious. I mean, you are nothing unless you are ambitious. And they both wanted to be great. And so Romulus said, I'm going to be the king. And the other one, Remus, said, no, I am going to be the king. And so they said, let us ask the gods. And so the gods were asked to give signs, because everything the Roman would do thereafter, every public act was marked by the taking of the auspices, asking the gods. And one of the favorite forms of auspices was a flight of birds. You mark out a sacred area in the sky, just with a cane, crooked cane called the lituus, and then you see from what quarter of that the birds come. And these eagles came swooping in as soon as Remus did it. And he said, there they are. I have seen the sign. There are 6 of them coming from the sacred direction. And then suddenly 12 appeared when Romulus did it. And Remus said, I should be king because I saw them first. And Romulus said, I know, but I saw more. So they still couldn't agree. So Romulus said, well, we've got to get on with this business, so I'm going to build a wall around the city. And so he took an oxen and plowed around it, making a sacred pomerium, as we Romans call it, and then built up wall around it. But the wall wasn't very high yet. And Remus came up and said, that's quite a wall you're building there, and jumped over it. And Romulus killed his brother on the spot. Never must the sacred borders of Rome be traversed in a spirit of contempt. And so there was only Romulus left to be king over the Roman people. And he was the first of our 7 kings, because we weren't ready yet for freedom. We had to have an apprenticeship, much the way the American colonies had to have an apprenticeship. And as in the American colonies, in fact, people came from all over the area, from all over Italy, poor people, seeking nothing but a chance to live free and have opportunity. And so we Romans have always been willing to welcome strangers. Not like the Greeks who are so exclusive. We welcome people to our land. And the land prospered under Romulus. And he conquered nearby areas. And the kings after him were good, one by one. And they showed one of the first qualities of the Roman people, virtus. Virtus. It gives us our word virtue. It's spelled by the Romans virtus. But we think of virtue as being nice, turning the other cheek. To the Roman, virtus meant to be a man. Its root was vir, a man. And it meant to be a warrior above all. And Romulus taught us the lesson, Father, that someone is always trying to take away our liberty. Somebody is always out there trying to make war upon the Roman people. Yes, I know, that's true, son. See the temple of Janus over there? I do. Can you tell me, son, what it means, the temple of Janus? Yes, well, it is the temple of peace. Whether its doors are open or closed means whether we are at war or peace. How many times have we been at peace since the year 753 when Rome was founded? When you get right down to it, Dad, one time. Because those people are always out there trying to take away our liberty, don't you see? Liberty abroad and liberty at home. For you see, Father, the seventh of these kings was a tyrant. And he showed that you must always be on the watch for those who would usurp power. His name was Tarquin. And he made the Roman people groan under a burden of slavery. He made us drain the Forum, the little creek that ran through it, creating a sewer to make it dry. He made us start building a temple to Jupiter. Jupiter Optimus Maximus, Jupiter the best and biggest, the true ruler of the Roman people. And he had a son named Tarquin. And we were at war with the city of Ardea. And this son of the tyrant was there with a number of Roman aristocrats besieging the city. And siege warfare is a long and tedious business. They didn't have anything to do, so they fell into a debate. Because I'm telling you now, Father, about this next statue here, this stern-eyed man, what he represents. And this stern-eyed man was one of the aristocrats debating this question, Lucius Junius Brutus. And they were debating the question of whose wife was the most chaste. And they went on, how are you going to settle this? And so they said, listen, nothing's happening here on the war front. Let's ride back home. It isn't far, back to Rome, and let's see whose wife is doing what. So they rode back, got there, knocked on the first door. Oh, this wife was having this tremendous party. Second, same thing. Went to Tarquin's house. Oh, what his wife wasn't doing. Then they went to the house of Collatinus, one of the aristocrats, very close friend of Brutus. And they knocked on the door, and there was the wife sitting there in her proper room, making a warm cloak for her husband with her own hands. She welcomed them in, had food prepared, and sent them on their way. Well, there's no question then whose wife was the most chaste, the wife of Collatinus. Lucretia was her name. So they got back there, went to bed, but Tarquin, the tyrant's son, just could not get the image of this chaste woman out of his mind. Oh, he just had to have her. He had to debauch her. Well, that's how tyrants are. They're always taking other people's property, or their wives, or whatever. So he rides back secretly to Rome. Knocks on the door. The wife comes and said, oh my gosh, has my husband been killed? And Tarquin said, no, but I have an important message from you. I want to come in, please, let me come in. And she said, yes, come in. He said, now let's go to bed. And she said, that's a terrible thing. I can't do that. I can't go to bed with you. And Tarquin said, yes, you are. She said, no, I'm not. And he said, all right, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill a slave, put you in bed together, and say I came here and found you together in bed and killed you both. Oh, she said, I can't be shamed like that. All right, let's go to bed. So they do. Then Tarquin goes back, and then Lucretia sends a message to her husband. Come home at once. Something terrible has happened. So with his friend Brutus, he rides back and gets there. Her father is there by this time, and she says, the imprint of another man is in your bed. She tells him what has happened. And he says, darling, you're not at fault. And she said, no, I know I'm not at fault, but I fear that some other woman might someday use me as an excuse for unchaste behavior. Avenge me, my husband. And she pulls out a dagger, Lucretia does, and stabs herself to death. And then Brutus, who up until this time had been thought to be dumb, kind of foolish person, that's what Brutus means, kind of silly and foolish, suddenly became hard-eyed and stern, picked up the body of Lucretia, the blood streaming down his war garments, and went out into the streets. And as the Roman people surrounded him, he said, do you now understand what it is to be the slaves of a tyrant? I want us to take an oath right now to drive the tyrant from Rome and to swear that never again will we have a king in Rome. Swear that oath. And they do. And from that moment, the tyrant was driven out with his whole family, and the Romans swore never to have another king. And Collatinus and Lucius Junius Brutus became the first consuls of the Roman people, the first consuls of a free republic. But, as in the case of our own revolution, you must win your freedom. And so the Romans had to fight against King Tarquin, who sought to regain his throne and power by bringing back a foreign army, an army of mercenaries hired by the kings of nearby cities who were afraid lest this contagion of freedom might spread. And one of these was Lars Porsena. You know the great old poem of Macaulay? Lars Porsena, by the 9 gods he swore that the house of Tarquin should suffer wrong no more. Lars Porsena brought this huge army, and they began to besiege this little republic. And they were there, and it seemed hopeless that the Romans could defeat so large an army come against them. And so it was decided that the only way to survive was to assassinate Lars Porsena, and then his army might go away, because the army was there only because of him, not to support Tarquin. And so a group of Roman youths, 100 of them, swore that they would assassinate Lars Porsena. And then they threw lots to decide who would have the first chance. And the one who won was named Gaius Mucius. For now we're looking at a third statue there in our Roman Forum of a man with only one hand, only a right hand. And in these days he had 2 hands. And he swam across the Tiber River, got to the camp of Lars Porsena. Gaius Mucius did, about 19-year-old youth, not much older than me, Dad. Got there and went into the camp and suddenly realized he didn't know what Lars Porsena the king looked like. And there were several people who were pretty well dressed by Roman standards, and so there was one of them sitting up there on a podium giving money, wearing a very fancy set of clothes, and so that must be the king. So Gaius Mucius ran up and stabbed him to death. But it wasn't. It was only the treasurer of the king. And so they grabbed Gaius Mucius, were holding him there. Lars Porsena came up and said, "What are you doing killing my treasurer?" And he said, "I won't tell you a thing." "Well, I know from your accent and language you're a Roman. What are you doing here?" "I won't tell you a thing." "All right, we're going to burn you. Go ahead." And so the fire was started. And Gaius Mucius took his right hand and stuck it into that fire and burned it off. And his father and Lars Porsena said, "I have never seen such courage. Pain means nothing to a Roman. We have virtus." "Well, listen, you are so brave, I'm going to send you back home. You don't have to tell me anything. I admire bravery. Since you treated me with honor, for we Romans respect honor, I will tell you this. There are 99 more men just like me, eager for the chance to come and kill you. And one of us will get it done. Then I will leave, for I can never conquer a people so brave." And so that statue shows Gaius Mucius, or as he came to be known, Gaius Mucius Scaevola, old lefty. That's what it means, literally, old lefty, standing there. What do all these men have in common? They have civic virtue, the willingness to subordinate their own interests to the good of the community as a whole. That is why that Lucius Junius Brutus, when he found that his sons were conspiring against the Roman people, had every one of them put to death by his own hand. And who is that? Why, that, Father, is the statue that commemorates when the Gauls came and sacked our city of Rome. They defeated us in a battle in 390 and came inside the city. We had to buy our freedom from the Gauls. And as the Gallic chieftain was pouring out the gold into the scales, he poured and poured and poured, and the scales never seemed to react. And then we discovered that the scales were weighted, they were false. And the Gallic chieftain looked at us and said, "Here," and put his own sword into the scale and said those words we never forget. "Vae victis," woe to the conquered. For the conquered have no rights. And we swore then never to lose another war. And by now we're out at the tomb of the Scipios. We look at that great wall of inscriptions. What does that one say, son? "I am Lucius Cornelius Scipio, called the Bearded One. I was consul of the Roman people. I conquered the land of the Samnites and the land of the Lucanians and brought back prisoners. I celebrated a triumph." And that one, I am Lucius Cornelius Scipio, the son of the bearded one. I conquered the island of Corsica. I brought back hostages and prisoners. I built a temple to the goddess of the weather. These are your ancestors. And then the ambassadors arrive. And they bring the news that it is war with Carthage. My son, I tell you, it will fall upon you to fight that war ultimately. And my greatest hope is that you be like these men of history you have told me about, that you be like your ancestors, and that one day you ride in triumph through the streets of Rome, celebrating a triumph so elevated in the eyes of your fellow citizens that there has to be a slave beside you in the chariot, whispering in your ear, lest you forget, remember, you are only a man.